Welcome to Season 2 of the Intersections on the Spectrum podcast. The Intersections on the Spectrum podcast is the brainchild of Doug Blecher and Kelly Bron Johnson, created to discuss intersectional issues within the autistic community and give visibility to commonly marginalized, repressed, underrepresented, or erased identities and issues. We aim to introduce you to the people and stories you didn't know about but needed to hear, and hope that by seeing yourself represented in the community allows you to feel seen.
Today we get to talk with Morenike Giwa Onaiwu. Morenike is an educator, writer, public speaker, parent, global advocate, and I'm sure much more than that. But that's just kind of the beginning. Morenike, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you both. I'm so excited to be able to meet with you all. It's been a while that we've been trying to do this.
Glad we made it happen. Starting out, we like to learn people's identities, and what would you say are the identities you're mostly connected with?
I'd say probably, obviously, my disability identity is very important to me. So although I, neurodivergent, autistic, ADHD, gifted, etc., I essentially, as a disabled person of color, those identities are very important to me. I identify as a non-binary woman, and I know for some people that's impossible, but I should explain a little bit more sense. But those, that's important to me as well. And really, my role being a parent is something that's extremely important to me. I've grown and learned so much from my kids through the years and I don't know, it's one of the greatest joys that I have. Well, also one of the greatest headaches sometimes, and then additionally, it's just really important to me, viewing myself as an educator. I believe in the concept of Republican intellectual, and so that's important to me. So, to me, a lot of the things that I do bleed together in terms of being an educator and activist, and writer, and advocate, all of that. They are all intended, for the same purpose, which is to amplify the voices of the people and to do my part to make change.
Nice. So I actually kind of identify very similarly to you in terms of I'll often say I'm a non-binary femme, just for simplicity's sake, because that's how I present. But now that you mentioned non-binary woman, I'm kind of curious, if you don't mind, if you want to go into that a little bit more before I jump into our next question.
Sure, I don't mind at all. It's interesting because it's so funny to me. There's so many things about one's identity that you start to learn that it's almost like peeling layers the more you find out about yourself. And so I remember when I got a diagnosis, my first mental health diagnosis occurred when I was 11 or 12 years old, that, gave me some clarity. And then over the years, as I obtained my ADHD diagnosis, discovered that I was autistic, etc., all of these things started to unfold. But I still thought, okay, but I'm still this, heterosexual cisgender woman, right? Because I thought that I'd spent a lot of time in HIV advocacy, and I'd worked very closely with a lot of really amazing trans activists, and I just always had the impression that if you're not dissatisfied with the body that you have, then your gender, is fine. That no one feels like a gender. I knew that some people felt like, felt a sense of disconnect from the gender, but for me, it was almost kind of like I have a name. I was given a name. And this is the name I call, I'm called, or this is what we call this piece of furniture, or this color, or this food. I was like, okay, people with this plumbing are called, are women, and no one really feels like that. Some people may feel that it's completely wrong, but no one feels like it's completely right. It's just like clothing. As soon as you come home, you take off, try to take off your clothing and get comfortable, or take off your shoes, but you can't take off the gender. It's just there. And so I never realized that there were people who the gender they were assigned at birth did really kind of match them. It is something that kind of felt, and I just didn't understand how it's something you could feel. It really just didn't make any sense to me. And so it was just kind of like the way my brain worked. I thought everyone, for a long time, everyone thought the way that I did, and I was surprised that they didn't. I thought they were weird. And so when I started to try to figure things out, I had to really look at myself, and I was thinking, okay, I have a lot of privilege, although I have a lot of marginalization, and I don't want to misrepresent myself. Because I do present, I will bronze and lip gloss and a skirt, which is, quickly as a bronze and jeans and t-shirt or whatever. And so I know how I present to people, what my family composition looks like. And I didn't want to seem to be an imposter. But I started realizing that a lot for me of the importance or the difficulty of letting go of the idea of womanhood was really more about the identity in terms of how I always viewed women as these change makers and these leaders who, bristle against the system and found ways to do things and made things happen. And there were just so many luminaries that I, had admired, especially being a Black person, being it just was such a core part of my identity that I didn't want to leave it behind. At the same time, I wanted to be honest about the fact that I could take it or leave it in terms of the idea of being a woman per se. I'm proud of it, feel it. It's that there's sort of a disconnect. And so I did some reading for a long time, and, just kind of the autistic mind, kind of like, okay, this doesn't make sense. Like, something is this, it cannot be this. And so I, it's like, well, how can this be a non-binary woman or non-binary male? If you're non-binary, you're non-binary, but then I realized it's just like anything else about identity and culture, and it's not that simple. It's not that binary. There's a mix of things. And so it was reading some things, reading up on things on gender, reading some of the work of some of the, the queer Black female writers, reading some things from Rebecca Sugar, actually watching Steven Universe, understanding the characters there that are non-binary femmes or non-binary men, but they're, and just kind of understanding all of that, it really kind of helped me decide that, who am I? Am I helping anybody by having the quote-unquote straight cis clothes on when that's not really me? People need to see the variety of who we are, our community, and I need to learn to accept it. And some people see themselves if I share myself. Sorry, that was so long.
No, but it's deep too, what you said. I kind of overlap in some ways, but not completely. I call myself almost gender agnostic. Like when you talked about the plumbing, I really feel no attachment to my plumbing, so to speak. I don't have any attachment to my parts. And, I even had a hysterectomy a few years ago for completely unrelated reasons, but there is almost a sense of relief in having that part of my womanhood gone and not being defined by that. Very interesting, very complex. I could probably talk about this all day.
One quick little thing, and I'll try to make it quick, is that I've noticed that there's a growing number of research studies talking about the connection between autism and polycystic ovarian syndrome, PCOS, which I'm diagnosed with. And so having, so for a lot of us, it's in terms of the amount of hormones that we have are maybe different than, they present differently, they're in different ratios than other people. And, in a sense, our experience of both gender and, our bodies are going to be different, I think, as a result of that. Like you mentioned, to me, I have this because it's what I was born with, I'm used to it, but I really don't freaking care about these things. They're just there.
Right, exactly. All right, so let's go into your article in Autism in Adulthood Journal, which is actually edited by T.C. Wiseman. We had as a guest last year. Anyway, just wanted to mention that. I love T.C. T.C. and I are friends. Amazing. Anyway, okay, so I wanted to talk about that article that you wrote about autism's white privilege problem. So what are some of the reasons that you see Black autistics may be wary of the autistic community?
I feel that there's so much erasure, and the thing is, it's not intentional usually, but, again, impact and intent are not the same thing. And so I think a lot of the autistic community, the experiences that people have are experiences that they assume are being had collectively by the community without thinking about it. For some people, autism is the first major marginalization they've ever had in life. And not everyone. And it is a real marginalization. We are subhuman to a lot of the world. But, for those of us who are already unfortunate, quote-unquote, subhuman, that the autism is just another layer of what we've already experienced. We've already, gender identity or, racial identity or sexuality or immigration identity or whatever that was seen as less than. And you can't really tease one or the other out. It's like, I remember having a conversation with someone once, and I was saying, when I was born, my parents opted for all of my siblings and I not to find out what we were. They got surprised that we were delivered. And so I told people, I said, no one knew anything about what I was going to, what my personality was going to be like, what my hopes and dreams would be, what footing I was going to have. All they knew was I was going to be Black. That I was going to be out. Doesn't matter what shade Black coming out. And that's something I think that sense of that's something that's part of you, whether whether your neurology is typical or atypical, that people don't understand. Like I can't. The idea of wearing, I think about some of the things that people have suggested. Oh, we should put it on our driver's license, or oh, we should have a badge. I'm thinking, excuse me, like that's like the worst possible idea, and just thinking about people don't realize how these things intersect, and it's very interesting because this article that you mentioned. It was actually another Black autistic activist reached out to me not long ago to share with me the article had been plagiarized, actually, word for word. And so it's kind of like I'm talking about racism and disparities in the autistic community, and in the article, and that same article was an example of the very thing that I'm talking about.
Yeah, and I've seen that. I'm following a lot of great autistic Black activists on Instagram who are, burning out as well, but sharing a lot of these aspects. And I always find it really enlightening to read the comments because it's often white people who are clueless and don't realize that their advocacy is not intersectional and that it doesn't. In some cases, it's not just not helpful, but it's also actively harmful against the BIPOC community in general. So
I just think about how there was the autistic community was up in arms about something, and I kind of remember there was something really, really pressing happening for communities of color. It's probably yet another trial, or something or other, something of that nature. I'm thinking, wow, we're a funeral, we can't bury our dead. You all are still up in arms about this thing or that thing. And even a lot of the charts that are you autistic charts, or whatever, questionnaires were such a white, talking about, doesn't like the hair like this, or has pets, or I mean, just very, very, very whitewashed examples that don't translate to that of other people's experiences. And clueless is exactly the word that I would use. And not understanding that, and sometimes bristling against people when they explain that this is harmful, or you're not, speaking or representing, us.
What I've noticed too is, so I follow another great Instagram account, mentioning them all. It's called Melanin Base Camp, and it's mostly Black, but it's for any people of color, getting outdoors, doing activities. I love travel, so I love to follow these things. And so I got into an argument with somebody in the comment section where they were saying there was a Black woman. She actually happens to be a professor and an expert in wildlife care. She was cradling baby bears, and that's her job. She's a researcher. She knows what she's doing. And, a white person took it upon herself to say, how dangerous this was and how she shouldn't be doing this and all this stuff. Or you should have a disclaimer on the account saying people don't do this. I'm like, okay, well, it should be obvious. Don't go pick up baby bears. But anyway, it doesn't matter. And when I pressed her on what she was saying, I said, well, unless you're going and saying that on white accounts with white people who do ridiculous things, you don't really have a place to say this to a professor.
Exactly.
Or, anyway. And then so finally, after she had no other way to defend herself against my accusation of racism, she's like, well, I'm autistic, so I didn't get this. And I'm like, well, no, it doesn't work like that. I'm autistic too, so let's go.
It's so frustrating that people try to use autism as a get out of jail free card.
Right.
I'm like, no, if you're being ableist, or if you're being racist, or if you're being whatever, autism is not, it doesn't excuse it. It may make some things need to be made more obvious to us. We may not get some of the subtleties, or what have you, not certain things more literally, but we were all still raised in this world which is full of all kinds of isms. That's not autism. That's whatever other ism that impacted you, and you just need to own it. Be real, instead of trying to use it as an excuse. Like, you have privilege, we all have privileges and marginalizations, and people just want to do anything to not be accountable.
But I always say, look, racism is not part of the criteria in the DSM-5. It's not.
Exactly.
It's not there.
It's not an ICD-10.
Right. It's not in there. So, I mean.
Morenike, Kelly was mentioning earlier about Black autistic advocates dealing with burnout. What do you see as some things that really need to happen in the autistic community for changes to occur so this is much less likely to happen?
I hate to say this, but I'm pretty skeptical. I don't know if it's going to happen in our lifetime. But I think part of what needs to happen is that I think people need to really, really self-reflect. And that's, because I think there's a lot of ingrained biases that we all need to undo. And people can think that they, oh, well, I'm queer and I'm poor and I'm disabled and I'm this. But yes, you are. And you still may be saying things that are, very, like the activity and anti-blackness, despite the fact that you know what it's like to be marginalized. And I think people don't want to kind of think and learn. We just react. And that makes that makes us feel gaslit, because I think like we're in a community where everyone's shouting Black Lives Matter, protect trans women, et cetera, and then these are the same people who don't have your back when things happen, who it's frustrating. I think it's going to take a lot before collectively anything happens, people to be willing to do the internal work. And I think if they don't, then we're just going to have more of the same. And, it doesn't make you a horrible person or a demon to have to unlearn some things. It makes you human. And I just wish that people didn't think that there's no possible way I can be this, or no possible way I can be that. And they would just look at what's their surroundings, or look at things that they're saying, or how it's impacting others, and just try to think more deeply and be conscious of their actions. As long as we are the labor that falls upon BIPOC and in particular Black autistic people to have to explain ourselves and have to be the ambassador and have to this and have to take everything with a, give everyone a pass for everything, but no one gives us one, and be in circumstances where we're triggered or disregarded or undervalued or underpaid. It's just, it causes people to want to withdraw. And I think also people really need to look at things. Everyone talks about intersectionality, but I think they need to understand that things are a lot more complex in our community. So a lot of these things that are very quote-unquote black and white issues, to white autistics are not for us. We can't go into our communities, policing the way, Lydia talks about autism or whatever, or, or what have you. We can't, there's certain things that just don't, for a variety of reasons. And I think that people, don't understand how we're living that balance and they're not. And so really, I just think community, like connection, learning oneself and learning one another, being open to listen, being open to learn, being open to grow and apologize, that those things are all needed, but it's something that we struggle as a community.
And I think also two things that you mentioned that are really important, I think, for people who want to take something away that they can use if there are people who are listening that want to make some changes. One, that your thoughts are not a character flaw. So being called out or being called in for whatever reason, whether it's sexism, ableism, whatever, that's not a character flaw, and it's not like a personality trait that you can't change. The fantastic thing about these beliefs is that they can be changed. And that's what I always try and tell people, like, you're not stuck in this way. You don't have to be stuck in this way. It's a choice to be stuck that way with bad, I guess, kind of ideas, if you want to call it that, or racist ideas or bigoted ideas. But also, and you mentioned unconscious bias. It's also really important to know, we've done a lot of research on unconscious biases. We all have them. The point is not to eliminate them. They're impossible to eliminate. They're in you, okay? The point is that you can just be aware that you have them, and then you can take steps. And there's tools, there's support you can use. If you're in a workplace and you're in charge of hiring and you know you have a particular bias, you then get a team of people to help you assess candidates so that you're not deflecting your bias in this case. Or you can step out and say, look, I can't vote on this particular issue right now, or I can't comment on this issue because I have a bias, and I'm going to let other people, go into that. Anyway, so just to say, so that people can know that it's not that you're stuck like this. There's things that we can do to kind of, I don't want to even say overcome. There's just ways to deal with it.
To deal with, yes. And that's the thing I love with that, because I feel like people feel like it's an indictment upon who they are on their character. And no, it's a thought pattern, or something that can be recognized and addressed like anything else. I think about a story. This is pre-COVID. People would fly a lot, and I remember I was at the airport, and there was another colleague of mine that was also, we happened to be both there and on the same flight, going to the same event. We had the same kind of flight. I was there early, and they were too. And I was kind of confused. I'm there early because I know I'm going to get always, quote unquote, randomly selected because I got a Muslim middle name, and so there's that. And then the hair thing. You know what I mean? The hair, they don't understand the hair. It always flags the machine. Like, I guess I have, I don't know, the hair isn't laying flat and smooth like they would expect. It's a different type of texture. So I prepare for that. I know I'm going to get patted down. I know this and that. And I'm going to have to move to the side. So I just built in the time so I don't miss my flight. But I was confused about why this colleague was there. This colleague's white. I'm thinking, your hair, you're right past the thing. And I was like, I didn't begin in that. Name is like super white red, type of name. It's not going to flag them as being terrorist name. So why are you here? And the person looked at me kind of dumbfounded, and it's like, when I go through the X-ray, they don't understand why they're seeing boobs and lipstick, but then they're also seeing my stuff down here. Because my friend was trans, and I was like, that had never dawned on me. I'm thinking, look like woman, your ID says woman, whatever. It's a privilege that I have that I'm going to get stopped for my hair. I'm getting stopped for racial things. But in terms of, the gender piece, I'm sliding right through. This person is not. And so it was something that I truly never really thought about. I seriously was thinking, why are you here early? This is ridiculous. And the person's thinking, if I'm not here early, I'm going to miss my flight. And so it just was a huge, for me, it just showed, wow, what a huge thing that I've missed that I haven't even thought about and could be more conscious of. And when have I thinking about flight arrangements that I've sent to people before that should I advise people to come early or whatever, so it's just about learning. And, you make your faux pas and you grow from them. But I think the problem is people don't want to admit them and they don't want to grow from them. And that's why we remain stagnant.
Yeah, and also great of your friend to be okay disclosing. Like, if you didn't know that they were trans in the first place.
I did. I just never thought about it.
Yeah, but even so, like, that's such a that maybe they weren't openly trans, and they might have like, well, I'm just here early because, and then it would have been, you would have missed that opportunity for growth yourself. But it could have also been uncomfortable for the other person. So anyway, it's really cool. It's a good example of what you don't see and what you don't know sometimes. So. Don't judge a book by its cover. So speaking about books, you're one of the editors for the book Sincerely Your Autistic Child, what people on the autism spectrum wish their parents knew about growing up, acceptance, and identity. In the editor's foreword of the book, it was mentioned that an important reason for creating the book was to help with the division of autistic adults and non-autistic parents. What do you think are some of the common mistakes and misconceptions that non-autistic parents may make in the parenting process?
Oh my gosh, there are so many.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is not even their fault. It's what people are, unaware, and they're scared, and they're trusting people that are supposed to be experts. And so there's so much egoism in that. So basically, parents are often gaslit, in terms of they may be uncomfortable with something, or it doesn't sound right, or they're being told that this person's the expert, and I'm going to tell you, you need to do this if you're a good parent, and or your child's life is working. And so the whole doom and gloom. And so they jump both feet forward into whatever they've been told to do, seeing this as an emergency that needs to be addressed right away, and taking the perspective of the professionals and or other parents as the law, and not thinking about what is my child telling me from the body language of their words, or what I know of my child that I'm raising? Does it align with these practices or with these concepts? Or, autistic adults, essentially, it's like just being told what to do, following it in hopes that there's going to be this magical outcome. And again, I'm just letting fear lead you and come in, and that's a problem. And also seeing autism as something to attack or fight. This is your child. So you're fighting or attacking something that's part of your child, that isn't inseparable from your child, that's part of your child's, neurology and psyche and identity. Very problematic things. But I think on the flip side, the autistic community, we're not very gentle with these parents, either. We can be really hardcore, and some of them are just don't know. there's a big difference between someone intentionally being ableist or rude and someone who's just kind of confused and ignorant and clueless. It doesn't feel good, but do we really need to, come at them with the, fury of a thousand burning suns or a puzzle piece or, some person first language? Or can we turn that to a teachable moment?
Yeah, exactly. It's finding that way of voicing concerns, and also understanding this balance, right? Like you said, there's outright abuse is going to need a different approach than somebody who is acting from a place of fear, which is, I think a lot of people forget. A lot of these parents are acting from places of fear. And that's because, like you said, that's what they've been told by professionals. If you don't do this kid's never going to succeed, right? Yeah. If you don't do this, he's never going to live independently. As if that's the worst threat, too. And I'm like, why is that the worst threat? Yeah. And why is that? Why are those threats? Why are developmental milestones becoming threats? Oh, well, you're not going to finish school or you're not going to read. Why is that a threat?
Yes.
You know how many people don't read?
It's really sad when you think about it, and that's what they do, is they latch onto someone's fear.
Yes.
Because, most parents who hope to for their child, you want them to be whatever it is that they want to be. They want them to be able to have options and opportunities. And so they try to make it look like your child will have no options and no opportunities and not by choice. And it's just, I think it's really one of the most cruel things that you can do to a parent is to attack their fear when it comes to their child, because you're not in the realm of logic anymore when it happens. Your emotions, it's your baby.
And Morenike, you were talking about autistic community isn't always says things in the most gentle way to non-autistic parents. Do you see autistic parents themselves in any way being a bridge to kind of reduce this division?
I hope so. And I do want to go back and say that being tone police is real. So autistic people shouldn't be expected to communicate like non-autistic people. So sometimes, just like we, if we try to meet them part way, people need to meet us part way if we're a little too over-enthusiastic or not very tactful about the way we say something. We need to try to really understand the heart of the message. And it isn't every person's job to have to, just like with racial reconciliation or whatever, it isn't every person of color's job to educate, other people when they can go learn for themselves. The same thing for autistic people isn't a task that they should have to take on. But I think that if given the opportunity, autistic parents kind of we do have the experience of being autistic and being an adult, but we also have the understanding of any parent of dealing with a child that might have access needs that we do, and dealing with the schools and the medical providers and society and all these different things. So I think there's a way that different parents can relate to both sides and hopefully generate some dialogue that to us all, really all to kind of try to understand where one another is coming from.
So one thing you brought up before about having your writing stolen or plagiarized, there are positives of being a well-known person in the autistic community, but there are also the other side that's not quite as fun sometimes. I mean, I've got some examples from myself that I could share, but so I'm looking at this question now. I'm not sure I like this question anymore. We're talking about once you get to a certain level of notoriety, you see ways that this can be prevented from happening. In other words, having your writing stolen, misversion. I find this. I don't know. This puts the onus on the person rather than.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. So I feel like that you shouldn't be on the person. Like human beings should people not get annoyed. I signed the heck out of everybody and everything. I saw something for the commercial and move me, I'm going to sign it. Because I want to give credit to all those little things, those little ideas. And then something that matters to someone labored over that. Someone's blood, sweat, and tears, and someone's dream, and someone's life. And so it's disgusting. I feel like it's the ultimate sense of entitlement and laziness to just steal people's things. And it's frustrating. So I think that really, we as first society, people should call it out. It shouldn't be acceptable. It shouldn't be seen as a small thing and a person's overreacting. because they weren't given credit. So really I think that, everyone needs to, kind of make it that it's done because it's acceptable. People get away with it, and that's why they do it, and it works. But, some things that people can do to protect themselves, it varies. I no longer have words in my presentations. They're all images, and I just kind of, they're like visual cues that I talk, because I've seen people steal and then make profit off of presentations and curricula that I've made. Writings are a little bit difficult. You can have something that's copyrighted, somebody still will steal it. And so really I think it just kind of goes to a deeper issue of why do people feel entitled to the labor and, of marginalized people, and that they should be able to just take, from us and profit from it and not give any sense of respect or, credit to, those who did, who laid the foundation. So I really don't have a real answer for how it can happen. I think it's going to continue to happen. I think by the time people stop is when if they get shed. But then someone else is going to do it at some point. This is caution people, and unfortunately it's probably happened to us all, but you just have to be ready to speak up. And it hurts, or you might feel sorry for the person, you might feel, or they might try to say it's flattered. You deserve to have your voice heard. You deserve to have your labor honored. And so I hope that people will feel it doesn't you the villain to call it out, to say something. And I hope that people see others, like the person who reached out to me. I'm so grateful. I had no idea that it happened that particular time. Other times I've come across it. So I want to share and let others know and not just let it be. That's, part of trying to mitigate these issues.
No, I agree. It takes a lot of education. That's certainly what I've been trying to do too. Because sometimes people, I'm not going to say they don't know when they're plagiarizing, but there are other cases where, for example, when I get approached, the way that I get approached, where I'll get messages, private messages that are not appropriate, and letting people know that this is not something that I accept. So I think it's about education. No matter how much you like someone, how much you feel that you connect with them, if I don't know you, I don't need a message. I don't need certain messages. I'm happy when people when they appreciate the work that I do. I'm not so happy when people want to bring in physical aspects or something about my appearance. I'm not interested in that. Yeah, so it's just, to me it's about education partly. I mean, my 12-year-old, he's doing school. He was filling out an assignment and he copied and pasted from Wikipedia. Just totally the whole paragraph. But he didn't know it was wrong, right? So I have to sit down with him and explain what this is and how, he can't get away with that. There you go. So,
he brought it to me, and I'm thinking, I'm a professor. He brought it to me, and I was like, what do you think of this paper? I said, I think you're going to fail. If it was you gave it to me, I would have half and get a 0. He's like, well, I have some 2/3 of it's plagiarized. How do you know? I said, child, I know how you write. This is not you. And the thing that was funny is it just didn't even sound right. It's just, I don't know why people are so afraid of their own voice, because usually you don't have to say something or package something the way somebody else did. If their idea inspired you, build your own.
Right, yes.
So Morenike, I've seen you give presentations a few times, and it's always great. But I read recently that you gave a presentation that I must know more about, and that was a presentation on the animated show Steven Universe. What did you talk about in this presentation, and how do you see animation in the way of being a tool in discussing disability and intersectionality?
I'm so glad for this question, but before that, I have to say, I've heard both of you speak, and you guys rock too. So thank you for your remark. But it's very interesting because actually my very first keynote that I ever gave was on Steven Universe, and then I had given. And so it was odd. So I had written one that was all gimmicky and professional, and I just was not feeling it. It just didn't work. It just wasn't right. And I think I've spent so much time. I think so many marginalized people, autistic people, and stuff, and various have this unfortunate sense of this imposter syndrome that you gotta perform, and you can't mess up because it's gonna look bad for your community. And you gotta work twice as hard to get half, and all this stuff you have from. Living in a world that doesn't value who you are. And so, trying to give presentations and make sure that you change it just killed it. But it wasn't. And so, I decided that I don't want my raised accomplishment to be an autistic person that doesn't look or sound like an autistic person. Like, so people can be like, oh, look, such and such, this is what the parents say, look, Tommy or whoever, she has autism too. And the kid's looking at you like you're a freak with 3 hands, like, I don't see anything autistic about you. But there's any one way to be autistic. But a lot of people have been, a lot of us have been taught to mask, camouflage, to, tone down the stimming, to tone down the scripting, to talk about things that are socially appropriate or that are going to get you, advancements. And, that's all great. I can do that. I can talk, I can talk about this concept or that and go as deep as you want to go. But I can also pull out this anime or this pop song, and I can find some amazing analogies in it that can talk about things. And those are things I actually like. I think that a person's capable of really being into, abstract philosophy and then also really liking Legos and, whatever. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles or whatever. So this time what I did was, it's very interesting because my children are the ones who introduced me to Steven Universe and talked about the qualities of gems, their durability, their strength, their beauty, and so forth, and how they're found, how they're formed. And I use that to talk about collectively and individually traits of autism, so the autistic community as a whole, and individual people. And I went through and gave examples of a lot of the different gems, Peridot and, diamonds, and this person and that person, the corrupted gems and so forth, and talked about them and kind of like giving, correlating it to people and to experiences, and also talking about the humans that live in it. I love using examples, and right now I'm trying to write one on baby fruit. I love using these different things. To me, my favorite speeches are the ones where I can take something from real life or from a special interest, quote unquote, of mine and, autistify it. I can take that and research and practical, this innovative, way that we think and see patterns and teach someone something or make a point.
Fun. I've actually never watched it. I have.
Oh my gosh, you've got to see it.
I'll check it out now.
You have spoons. I love I have speeches that I've done on Dragon Ball, on CN Super, and on, some characters like from Disney and Pixar. There's just so much that I think you can use. Growing up, a lot of, I speak about things like Marvel and, all these different things that taught me a lot about identity and it's okay to be different and just, intersectionality and disability. But I feel like this is already kind of built into a lot of these things, and we should really use them as a tool for youth and adults.
Have you watched Doctor Who? Okay, because I wrote a thing years ago about, I was comparing Doctor Who and Sherlock, but not about them specifically, but about their trusted companions. Because Doctor Who always has a companion, and Sherlock has Watson as his companion, and about autistic people needing a trusted companion. Somebody that they can, I consider that my partner. I say that he's my cipher to understand human behavior, because I always ask him, like, what did this person mean when they said this? I don't understand. So I find, so it's interesting because, Doctor Who is an alien, but he lives in this human body, but he has a person. He always has a different companion with him. That it's not a lover. It's just a partner that will go with him and kind of explain the way that humans see the world, whereas he has this understanding of the whole universe. If you're interested, check out Doctor Who. Yeah,
I think I will, actually.
Morenike, thanks so much for joining us. It was a pleasure. Loved every minute of it.
Thank you. So much fun to be able to talk to you.